Biden yesterday said that Republicans like Trump are the kinds of guys you'd like to smack in the, it's Sunday, so we'll say tail. But care to translate?
I don't even know what that means.
I don't either.
Andrew, the sitting president is supposed to be the top surrogate, but President Biden isn't even spending this part of his Sunday calling influential thinkers or labor leaders. He is right now at lunch at a golf course in Delaware, close to his home. His last scheduled stop in a swing state, stumping for Harris, sounded a little something different than we've heard.
When I was in Scranton, we used to have a little trouble going down the plot once in a while from Greenwich. But I'm serious. These are the kind of guys you like to smack in the ass.
According to various reports, President Biden and his inner circle kept dates on his schedule open to go stump for Harris, and the Harris campaign just never really came calling. He has recently proven to be a distraction to the vice president following Garbagegate, and progressives are urging the president to channel his feelings from July when he dropped out.
I mean, if I was Joe Biden, and I knew, look, his legacy obviously is at stake in this election, and he is the president of the United States, got a lot of work to do as president, I would probably look at the numbers, I would look at the race and say, I'm going to focus on being president over the next couple of days. And that's probably the best, that's the best thing he can do for not just the Harris campaign, but himself and his legacy too.
The vice president's Tuesday night election headquarters is going to be just 2.5 miles away from here. We haven't yet been told that President Biden has even been invited, but that tracks with what we saw a couple days ago. She was on the ellipse giving a speech. He was in the White House, not part of it.
Boy, you know, it's getting more and more pathetic every day, Jesse. Usually when you smack somebody in the ass, it's a player it's a teammate who makes a great play, scores a winning goal. Is he senile, stupid, or both?
I sometimes smack you in the ass after a great show, Greg.
That is true.
Your Friday exclamation point out. That, boy.
HR knows about this.
Keep it up. You said you liked it. So Biden, in just 24 hours of the last week, said he's going to lock up Trump and smack his garbage supporters in the ass. And then he's like, and then pass the baby feet. I mean, this guy is out of his mind. They've confiscated his phone. They've confiscated his laptop, but he keeps escaping the White House and giving speeches. I don't know what's going to happen because he's now at a point where he doesn't give a you-know-what. And so he doesn't even care about his presidential library. He's supposed to invite people to come over and spend the night in the Lincoln bedroom, but he's like, I just don't really feel like it. But it's like $300 million to do a library like that. And he's calling donors, and the donor's like, let's just wait until after the election before I open my wallet. Because why would you give money to Joe Biden at this point? It's just a waste. He's very old and his legacy is really bad. Kamala, if she loses, that lunch that she has weekly is going to be great. She's probably just going to want to drown him in a soup because she got to hate this guy. He's responsible for probably 3 or 4 of the worst news cycles she's had. I just can't wait to see the letter that he has to leave Trump in that desk if she loses. It's probably going to be something like, Dear Garbage, you beat 2 women, but you didn't beat me, Jack. Sincerely, the big guy.
Yeah, see you in the alley.
Yeah,
right.
That's right.
Judge, it is incredible how little the media and most people care about the current state of the presidency. I mean, they're acting like this election on Tuesday is the biggest thing ever, while ignoring the fact we haven't had a president for how long?
I think about 1.5 years.
Yeah.
But you know what's amazing is they only sideline Joe when they think that he's going to harm them politically. But when he comes out and says stuff that is, that we criticized him about, they said, it's a cheap fake, it's disinformation, it's misinformation. But when it hurts them, then of course they're going to sideline him. But besides locking up Trump, the thing that I think is most outrageous, he wants to take him behind the high school, the gym, and beat him up. But when he said he'd like to put him in the bullseye, and I think it was 4 days later, Trump was shot in the head. I mean, the Democrats get away with anything. And in the end, I think that all you have to do is just look at him saying that, smack him in the ass. He just looks so mean, so angry, and the man should not be running the country. And the fact that they've hidden him is really a sad commentary on what they're going to do in the next administration.
Isn't that the big revelation, Harold, that we've learned that maybe America doesn't need a president? We haven't had one. Maybe it's just run by a big dark machine, right? The deep state, Harold, that you are a part of. Why don't you just come out and admit it?
I differ with you guys on this one. I think we need a president. I think the country, one of the reasons Democrats believed that it was the right thing to do to move on to Vice President Harris and President Biden agreed. I think his legacy will be big. I think, Jesse, because of that, you've never had a president give up the presidency in the first term like this. You did have.
They threw him out.
He didn't give it up willingly, Harold.
You had LBJ and you had Truman, but at the same time, you've not seen something quite like this. And Judge, I would remind everybody around the table, there were moments, I think rightly so. I think some people around the table and other places called it elder abuse to even have him in this job for this period of time, and he should not seek re-election. And I think, Greg, in fairness to you, saying that you think that he should have been removed before the election, I don't necessarily think that is the case, but Democrats moved on from him. Now, one of the things I think is interesting is if you look at some of the late polling here, it appears that some of those late deciders in the battleground states are deciding a little bit more for Kamala than for President Trump. This is just the exit polling. People could be misrepresenting or just lying. But one of the things they're saying is that they're ready to move on too from President Trump. That just the language and the narrative and the negativity, they just don't want that over the next 4 years. But we've got 2 days, 2 or 3 days here, or 2 days before the polls close, and probably take another week to count them all across the country. And I'm going to be as interested in the gender gap and other things that Dana talked about. But President Biden will have a good legacy from whether win or lose. I think the country, Democrats certainly will appreciate his 4 years and what he did to make way for another generation of leadership.
I lost interest in the last minute of what you said.
I did too.
This is the way it always goes. By the way, we'll know that how mad Biden is if the FCC does go after SNL.
Yeah.
Like he's behind the scenes like, wait, maybe you can get him. Look, I kind of want to laugh at that, but also he's the president of the United States of America. So that kind of concerns me that he's with gusto saying those kind of things on the trail. I'm sure she doesn't appreciate it. And the thing about unity is I do have trouble unifying with someone who calls half the country fascists and fascist supporters, and the allies who call the Madison Square Garden rally a Nazi rally. Like, I do think it's hard to come together in that way. And I think that undercuts her message.
Well, Joe Biden has a pattern of saying things like this. It seemed to go over well with the crowd, although probably less well with much of America. This type of rhetoric, he talks about wanting to lock President Trump up, saying that half the country is garbage, that you want to do this to the people who are passing tax cuts. It's probably part of the reason why Joe Biden is struggling with favorability. His job approval rating right now, according to the Real Clear Politics average, is 40%. That's well below previous presidents at this point in their presidency, including Donald Trump. And so there's a reason why Kamala Harris is probably wanting to sideline him. She wants everybody to forget that she is his vice president.
Yeah, I think so. I think somebody put in a call and said, you're wanted in the Situation Room, Mr. President. But, you know, Joe Biden, from his party and from the media, gets a pass on this stuff. I mean, he wanted to take Trump out behind the barn. He says that he'd like to smack him, you know where. Trump says something about Liz Cheney, that if she were out in the battlefield, is the context in which he was saying this, her view on war might be a lot different. The Harris campaign, the legacy media goes crazy. I even noticed that you and your colleague Jonah Goldberg had to go around about it when he admitted that he had taken it out of context when he said it was horrible.
Yeah, well, and what's a shame about that is it's a really good discussion to have about how we fight wars, whether we should be fighting wars without a strategy for success, whether the way that we've been fighting wars for the last few decades is really in the American interest. That's one of the reasons why people like President Trump. And so when he talks about that, that resonates with a lot of veterans of some of those recent interventionist wars who feel that we should be much wiser about how we handle our foreign policy and minding American interest. But you don't get that kind of discussion discussion because people in the media don't want to. Likewise, much worse than this rhetoric about beating people up is that the Biden-Harris administration actually has used lawfare against their political opponents, whether those are parents at school board meetings or pro-lifers or protesters or Donald Trump himself, who they tried to remove from the ballot, who they've tried to imprison, who they've tried to bankrupt. These are very serious issues, lawfare, foreign policy, that people are voting on, but a lot of our media doesn't cover it as the important issues they are.
Just so folks at home have the full context, Jonah Goldberg, who used to appear frequently on Fox News, said on Friday that Trump had called for Liz Cheney to be put in front of a firing squad, and then later walked it back to say, oh no, that's not the context of what he was saying. New York Times Siena poll, it's got a lot of interesting findings in it, including this, that the New York Times finds that late deciders are breaking Harris's way 55 to 44. Typically in a very close election, late deciders will break as a group. What does this potentially say about what we'll see on Tuesday?
Well, I think it really explains what we've seen in the last week of the campaign and media coverage. So you have people saying things on both sides, but you have the media really focusing on they're focusing on the issues in a way to sort of advantage Vice President Harris. That matches with the media coverage that we've seen for Vice President Harris thus far. They know that Donald Trump is actually in very good poll position, particularly relative to where he was 4 or 8 years ago. And so one of the tried and true techniques is to drive up someone's unfavorables, and so you're seeing that reflected in the media coverage. Whether those polls are accurate, whether the New York Times is accurate, whether they actually understand what's going on in the country. I mean, one of the things they said in their polling was that they have over-response from Democrats and under-response from Republicans. So, I mean, who knows what's going to happen?